Hello, and welcome to Howard's Huddle, where we are bridging careers for veterans and military spouses. Thank you for listening in. I'm your host, Jim Lindsay, and today we are joined by Carole Turner.
Carole is a senior advisor for PsychArmor, a nonprofit harnessing the power of education, training, and technology to transform the connection between military and civilian communities. She joined PsychArmor in November of 2020 as a part-time external relations coordinator. Her current role allows her to leverage her lived experience of 30-plus years as a military spouse, as well as her passion for communication and connection to support military and veteran communities. Carole attended the University of Maryland, graduating in 1990 with a BA in English and a BS in journalism. She later earned a teaching certificate and a Master's of Education Curriculum and Instruction from George Mason University in 1997, and recently completed Dare to Lead training. Carole has been an active advocate for military communities for more than 30 years, reflected in her volunteer roles, including board and advisory positions on multiple unit family readiness teams, the Navy Marine Corps Ball Committee, local Navy Marine Corps Relief Society chapters, the Desert Leadership Seminar, and Spouse Organization. A champion for military spouse employment, she regularly presents to military spouse leadership programs. Previous work experiences include a public relations role at Hope for the Warriors, and 5 years as a communications director of a church in Arlington, Virginia. Currently residing in Okinawa, Japan, she continues to enjoy the military lifestyle and all of the opportunities and people it brings into her life. Carole, thank you for your service, your family's service and sacrifices, and thank you for being here today on Howard's Huddle.
Thank you very much. And what originally brought this to your attention?
Howard Gum is my grandfather's brother. I'm hoping, with this podcast, obviously it's to bridge careers for veterans and military spouses. It's the main focus, but I thought a little tribute to him and his sacrifices. The more I've gotten, and I say gotten to know him from reading the letters from Howard's wife to Howard's captain, and also some of the chaplain and Howard's other comrades. I have the actually handwritten letter correspondence back and forth from the different parties from 1945. It's quite chilling. I get chills talking about it. Behind me are Howard's medals. I have his Distinguished Cross behind me, his Bronze Star and his Purple Heart. Obviously, the DSC is the medal we're trying to get upgraded. Being so long ago, they also need you to have 2 eyewitnesses. Most of those guys are passed, right? But I do have eyewitness handwritten testimony from his captain and another member of his company from that time back January of 45. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing with the name of the podcast. The only thing that there is on file, which I think is pretty sad, is back in 1985, his widow, who had then remarried, she had remarried after he had, some time after. I don't know exactly how long it was. Yeah. But for whatever reason, in 1985, she requested her gold star. I don't know if she had lost it, or I don't know the reason. That's the only thing in his military records, was her requesting the gold star and her getting denied because it was too long after.
That's so wrong.
Back in this past year, it was sometime in the fall, my Uncle Fred, who was an Air Force veteran. So Howard here on the screen behind me, his name is Howard Frederick Gum. And my Uncle Frederick Howard Gum, was named after Howard.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and so my Uncle Fred had all of these letters and all of his medals, and I had started to do some communications just because of what I had read. And then when I read the letters and I held them and I saw, you see the handwritten letters back and forth, that correspondence. I said, I think, he was put in for the Medal of Honor. I don't make those decisions, obviously. I think maybe he got shortchanged. So I'm going to see what I can do. All they can do is tell me no.
Listeners, are you a business looking to recruit from the incredible Southern New Hampshire University military community? Are you curious about the ultimate sacrifice, yet the undersung story of World War II hero Howard Gum? Let's honor him in the way he undoubtedly deserves and help him get the recognition that he is long overdue. Let's honor our military community by helping bridge the gap in their careers, discovering their stories together. Now's your chance to learn and connect. Reach out to Jim Lindsay at Southern New Hampshire University. He's ready to help you tap into his valuable resources. Email Jim at j.lindsay1@snhu.edu. That is j.lindsay1@snhu.edu. you?
Obviously, you've been a military spouse for a few years now. So how has being a military spouse impacted your career aspirations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for asking that. I will tell you that I had to make a career shift because of being a military spouse. I had gone to school for journalism. And at the time, which is the early 90s, there was a bias against hiring military spouses, as I'm sure you well know. Nobody wanted anybody that wasn't going to stay in the job a long time or that they couldn't count on. And of course, it was illegal to ask someone if they were a military spouse, but they just look at your record and they know that. So I had several jobs. I worked in for trade publications and magazines and small magazines, but it got harder and harder to get hired as we moved around. So I decided I'll do a career switch and I'll get my teaching certification and become a teacher because that would be something I could do anywhere. Well, I bumped right into licensure. I ended up midway through getting my master's in education. We got orders. The George Mason University allowed me to finish and do my student teaching in California under Fullerton out there, the Cal State system, Cal State Fullerton. But then I ended up with Virginia certification and was living in California. And this was, in an era we had licensure. And I just want to give a shout out to all of the people over the last 20 years who have worked to solve both of these problems, both the problem around the bias towards hiring military spouses and the licensure issue, because the current spouses today don't run into that same problem. I was actually essentially out of the workforce at that point. Also, 9/11 happened and my husband deployed 9 times, right? So to say, how was my employment affected by being a military spouse? It was a 2-part problem. Number 1, being the hiring and licensure problem. And number 2, being a single parent with a deployed spouse multiple times. He did 3 tours in Iraq and 2 full year-long tours in Afghanistan, in addition to a myriad of other moves and moving around. So, yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of things there, of different type of obstacles or things that came in the way, right? The licensure for California, or you had the Virginia license, no good in California. And I know they've done a lot of work, particularly in the last couple of years, focused on education, those military spouses that are educators, those military spouses that might be nurses, right? So they can take that from state to state, which is fantastic. So would you say, the next question I was going to ask you is, what would you say the biggest obstacle that you faced in maintaining a career while being a military spouse to an active duty service member?
I would say for me, and I'm of an older generation, my husband has been, we've been married since 1991. So I faced those barriers and blockades in the 90s when I was trying to start my career. But the biggest thing for me has been having a gap in my career. So I'm one of those people that had a gap in their career and then tried to re-enter the workforce. And that's something that I particularly have a heart for, because I think I have some thoughts and ideas for other people in my position that are trying to re-enter the workforce as a military spouse after a gap in career. So that, I would say that for me, coming back in, it was probably more that gap. The reason there was a gap was because of deployment issues, licensure issues, bias against hiring military spouses. But now at this point, it was overcoming a significant resume gap for me of 10 years or more.
Okay, yeah. So you had mentioned earlier, right? Essentially raising was it your son or your children?
Two boys,
right? As a single mom, as your husband was deployed. What strategies have you found effective in balancing your career with the demands of military life?
Well, first of all, I would say always in military life, it's about the network. It's about the other families, the other spouses, your unit, the other people that are going through deployment, that you can rely on each other. That becomes a family and a support network. One of the main things for me was I enjoyed being involved. And because I enjoyed being involved in creating that network to support each other, I was in a lot of volunteer positions in a lot of volunteer communities. And one thing that is very important to me is that you leverage the skills and the relationships you form during that volunteer time. That time I was out of the workforce, I really leaned into volunteering. That helped me create my network, but it also helped me as I look to re-enter the workforce.
So how would you say, with the extended deployments that you've had, with your husband, several over the years, we won't get into how many years, we don't want to disclose anybody's age here. You're still 29 plus a few, right?
I'm owning it. I've been around a minute. It's all good.
How would you say that the extended separations, right, affected your ability to pursue your career goals?
Well, it made it really difficult. I was living away from my family. My husband and I are both from Maryland, but we did the majority of his career out in California. I didn't have the built-in childcare options of family nearby or friends nearby. And so I didn't have those resources. That made it very, very difficult to go back full time to work. So that was certainly a barrier that definitely kept me in a position where I was staying home more. And then, of course, we moved quite a bit. While I was in California, I was in 29 Palms, California. I was in Sacramento, California. I was in, San Clemente, California. I was in Oceanside, California. Even just to say California doesn't mean I was ever in the same place. So moving around and having to navigate, whether that be childcare or after school programs or sports teams for the kids, it was a really significant barrier to being able to work.
You mentioned a lot about the military spouses networks, right? And being on the different bases. Now, this, I guess, would be for maybe more of a newer, we'll say, military spouse her service member or his service member is now enlisted, and you're going to your PCS into a new location for the first time. How do those networks, are you able to take those networks with you, and how comfortable or uncomfortable was it going to that new location or that new base and having to redevelop a network?
It's really interesting. I feel very privileged to have seen a lot of change in the scope of how those networks are formed and created. Back in the day, we had a lot of great success with just being there and being part of the unit and meeting face to face. The model has changed, and these younger spouses know how to leverage online. We've all been through COVID. I think one of the COVID keepers is a lot of the virtual technology and more of an emphasis on a remote workforce. I think that today's spouse find their network with like-minded people in online communities, and all of the resources that are available to spouses today are there in an online format. You can join employment groups. Of course, it's always nice to meet in person, and it's great that many of the large national organizations that support employment do tend to have smaller group meetings or networking groups, always business associations. But you can I was just in a presentation with SECO, the Spouse Education Career Opportunity Office, which is a DoD funded program. And you can register there to put all of your information in. It becomes available to all the employers in their system. So I feel very lucky to have seen the evolution of the old model that worked for us to what the younger spouses are doing today and availing themselves of online resources, online networking groups, and relationships.
Great. So now let's take a little bit more of a dive on what you do with the current organization that you work for. I know I can't tell you how many trainings through PsychArmor. I've done them on my own. I do it through some folks with our HR folks as far as veteran recruiting certificates and things like that. So first one is, what are some of the most common challenges that veterans face when transitioning from military to civilian life?
Well, certainly one of the biggest things is not being understood. I don't care if you're engaging with your doctor, your healthcare provider, your employer, your neighbor. You want someone who understands you, and PsychArmor provides that. We offer military culture training that transforms the way anybody engages with military veterans, their families, and caregivers. Having just a little bit of cultural awareness, knowing which questions to ask. Hey, where did you serve? What did you do in the military? Understanding that everybody's not a soldier, or that not everybody went into combat, that there's specialized skills. So we provide that. We provide that to all kinds of communities so that they can improve their connection and support of military and transitioning veterans, as you were talking about. That is an important thing, but we also have a really robust portfolio of courses that are in workforce development, training employers on how to attract and retain veterans and military spouses, and also the benefit of having a workforce that is comprised of veterans and military spouses.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I know with the work that I do here at Southern New Hampshire University, I have had an opportunity to meet with many different companies, large and small, and I can't even tell you how many that I have referred to go check out PsychArmor, and whether they make it a mandatory or just something that their staff members can do, how beneficial that can be.
We've had a lot of success in the last year or so going in person and doing trainings, and we've been particularly involved in task force movement, which is helping to solve, a national issue, which is a crisis in both the trucking industry and the cybersecurity industry in terms of needing more people in the workforce. And so we've been really involved in that and training the employers there and connecting the employers to the workforce. And you and I know, but maybe not all the employers know what great employees these are. These are employees that are service minded, that have a wonderful service ethos, that are responsible, that have leadership training, because we both know every single level of the military offers leadership training. And the military spouses, they're flexible. They've got a much bigger worldview. They're a great workforce. So it's been really fun. We feel like we've really been able to help solve a national crisis, right, in some of these industries through supporting that, through that partnership.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. What the veterans bring, what the military spouses bring, the networks that the military spouses bring, right? A military spouse isn't just sitting home knitting. They're the CFO. They're the CFO of the household while their service member is deployed. So they have a lot going on.
It's interesting that you say that, because I tell the military spouses I meet now, so I'm in Okinawa, right? And we have some SOFA laws. So the Status of Armed Forces Agreement that restricts working. And that can be really tough. And we're all working to try and overturn that. But what we end up with is spouses who are highly skilled, who are not able to work, and they're running amazing program and welfare programs and social programs over in Okinawa. So we have great programming. And I tell every one of them, don't ever put that as a gap on your resume. Take all those skills, the things that you are doing, and just write it in as you had this role, program management, or you ran this program, or you oversaw the finances for this organization, whatever it is. You don't list that as a volunteer. You list that as a skill right on your resume, right in the timeline. Doesn't matter whether you're paid for it or not. You're building skills and they're all working.
I say that so many times when I have an opportunity to get on the phone with one of the military spouses. Like, well, I haven't done anything for the last 5 years. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't do anything? What have you done? Okay, what have you done? Well, I didn't get paid. If you didn't get paid, doesn't mean anything. You still did it. You still did the work.
I tell them to write their resume just in chronological order, or whatever they want to do, put the things they want to do first at the top, however they're organizing resumes these days, but don't differentiate between your paid work and your volunteer work, because focus on the skills, because they have incredible skills. And by the way, a bigger aperture. They have a bigger way of looking at the world, because they've lived in a variety of different places. They've met larger populations of people. So there's just a lot of skills to be gained from being a military spouse.
Yeah, so I want to switch a little bit here. In the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned something as far as healthcare and supporting veterans and those service members through end of life. What specific programs or resources does PsychArmor offer to assist veterans accessing healthcare services?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of our biggest things, we were actually formed to address barriers to entry for veterans and military. We know that veterans, military only want to see a provider that understands them, that gets them. So our original mission when PsychArmor began 10 years ago was to train mental health providers on military culture so they can more effectively engage with and connect with the veterans that they saw in their office. Still have that to this day. We do veteran ready training for healthcare providers, primary care providers, all across the spectrum. And there is data that proves that reduces the barriers to entry. You are more likely to get someone into treatment, into service, if they feel understood and feel like that their service is going to be recognized and valued with the person that's treating them. So that is one of our primary goals and mission. We have an entire portfolio. It's called Veteran Ready. And we have that for healthcare providers. We have it for organizations. So that's a big factor.
The month of June, PTSD Awareness Month. How do you address mental health needs of veterans, and what resources are available for those struggling with PTSD or mental health issues?
So it's a two-pronged approach, right? We've got the resources that are available directly for the service members and veterans, but we also have the resources for the caregivers, the families, the providers that are caring for them. So I'm going to talk about both sides of those. So we have a portfolio of more than 250 courses that are free online, and they're gonna cover crisis response planning. There's a lot of suicide prevention that's in there, but there's also a lot of care. There's training, resiliency training. We have a course actually on mantram training, which is a wonderful mental health technique that you can take. That is something that's several years back in the library, but I think is a great and wonderful resource. So all of those courses are free to individual learners. However, we also work to train the caregivers and the loved ones that are helping to support the veterans. And some of this takes the form of coaching into care, for instance, or of having conversations. having tough conversations. We've got an entire portfolio right now on lethal means safety, for instance, how to have those kinds of conversations. And that's a big part of our suicide prevention portfolio. Our courses, we try and approach both sides of the conversation to support the veterans and their families.
So this is one thing, and I mentioned earlier that my dad's a Korean War veteran. My mom's still living. They're still together here, about 10 minutes or so from my house, but they're both getting of age, right?
Yeah.
Where you never know when one might go, who's going to go before the other. And my mom's there. My dad gets around pretty well. He's not in need of any serious type of help yet. What initiatives does PsychArmor have to help those veterans or military spouses or even other family members like myself? If my mom goes first, then my dad's going to need some assistance for those that are caregivers for the service member.
I'm so glad you asked that question. Our caregiver portfolio is one of our most robust and most used portfolios. It created with the USAA. USAA has funded and supported that, and we're in partnership with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which of course is focused on caregivers. And we offer actually we have a certification and binder, a resource binder that we provide, a series of courses that if a caregiver completes them, they have access to actually an acknowledgement of the work that they've done, which includes a list of resources. So we have numerous courses for caregivers, and most recently, we have created a course that would be perfect for you and your family, and it's caring for veterans at the end of their life. And that is courses to train anyone that is a caregiver for an aging veteran to provide compassionate care that allows them to honor their veteran stories and engage with them at the end of life, and also provides quite a bit of resource information about exactly the programs that you can access as a veteran at the end of life. So we have, again, some of our courses focus on care for caregivers, right? Understanding that.
Yeah.
We in fact have courses that are for kids as well, because we know that kids are often hidden helpers for the military and veterans in their lives. And so they function as hidden helpers in a lot of households. So we have courses on that. We recently created a journal that is a guide book for small group settings for youth that are in caregiving situations, and military and veteran connected youth in caregiving situations. So that's like a program guidebook. One of the other programs we have is training for peer mentors, by the way, just offering that as well. That's been a course that came out funded by Wounded Warrior Project just a year ago. And there's an entire course on how to become a peer mentor and create small group support around these communities.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I know we got to wrap it up here. I have one more question for you. So what advice would you give to someone who is just beginning their journey from military to civilian life?
I think the most important thing that I think of is to, first of all, can I start with a caveat? I'm just going to offer.
Yes, of course.
Everyone I've talked to, and it's been in my work at PsychArmor, so many people, everyone from a 2-year enlistment to 4-star Marine, right? Transitioning from the military is hard. It really is. So the number one thing is create a life afterwards where you can find your sense of mission and purpose, because that's going to be very, very important. Make sure that the choices you make, you're still finding that. But the second thing I would say is to really, really engage in networking. Networking, leveraging the relationship you had from that time and your community relationship. Seek out a mentor in the workplace. Avail yourself of the transition programs, the programs that are available for career coaching on both the veteran and the mil spouse side. So I think there's a lot of resources out there that are underutilized. I think it's very important to take some time with it and also take some time to rest. I think the networking, I'll tell you my story. I was a volunteer helping to support a program started by a friend whose husband had been injured in combat. And so I just wanted to support her and support the program. Through that, I met someone who was one of the founders of that organization. 10 years later, she hired me in my current job.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. PsychArmor puts money where its mouth is. You know, they're supporting me as a military spouse through 2 different moves in my time there. And so finding organizations that are going to be willing to understand, to take the time to learn about military and veteran culture and to be supportive of you is very important as well. I know I named a lot of things there, Jim.
No, that's great. Carole, I really appreciate that. And I say that all the time when I'm working with folks. Yeah. Start with your network, and your network is it's your family, your closest friends. You start there, and then you grow out from there. And
Right.
look what happened for you and where you are now, and how fabulous PsychArmor has been for you in supporting you and your husband through your
Absolutely.
military service. And I appreciate you. I appreciate your service. I appreciate the sacrifices that you and your family and your husband are making. And I appreciate you coming on to this episode of Howard's Huddle.
It's been wonderful. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I think sharing stories is what it's all about. So thank you very much, and good luck with the Howard's Huddle mission.
Thank you, Carole, and we'll talk soon. I've been your host through this incredible episode, Jim Lindsay, and I can't wait to welcome you back for another round of inspiration, knowledge, and empowerment. So don't miss out. Tune in next time. Same place, same energy, here on Howard's Huddle.